Hello, everyone. I'm Julia Pyper. Welcome to Connecting Through Crisis, a special live stream series by GZERO Media in partnership with Microsoft and Eurasia Group. The video you just saw set the scene for what we'll be talking about over the next 45 minutes or so. Climate change, sustainability, and real actionable solutions to the biggest global crisis of our lifetimes. Like the UN General Assembly taking place this week, today's event is totally virtual. Joining me now is Gerald, Eurasia Group's Vice Chairman. Hello, Jerry.
Hi, Julia.
We also have Lucas Joppa, Microsoft's first Chief Environmental Officer. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, Lucas, I'd like to start with you. We know from scientific research that climate change is the biggest crisis of our lifetimes. But in the middle of a pandemic and economic recession, that may be hard for some people to really think about. So, to put our discussion in context, how do you think, or why do you think it's important to keep a laser focus on climate change in the middle of everything else that's going on right now?
Well, at Microsoft, we talk about, kind of COVID as the crisis of the year and climate of the crisis as the crisis of the decade and beyond. So I think that's a really good framing. We are going to get through the COVID crisis that we're experiencing as a global species. And when we do, we have a much bigger, quite frankly, crisis ahead of us, which is trying to ensure the stabilization of our global climate systems. We've simply got to do that if we want to continue to improve the global human experience. There's just no question about it.
Jerry, turning to you, COVID-19 could take our collective eyes off of climate change. There's only so much bandwidth, and UN leaders have already expressed some concerns about regression and a lack of resources to tackle the climate crisis caused by the expense of coping with COVID-19. So I understand you're still optimistic. Why is that?
Well, first of all, I have two teenage children, so there's not much of a choice but to be an optimist about finding solutions on climate change. But there's a lot of evidence in our recent experience that we've scaled up solutions to the climate problem much more quickly than we have other structural problems in the past. Let's face it, this has really only been a mainstream global topic of geopolitical conversation since around 2007. The release of An Inconvenient Truth put this on the radar screens of publics around the world, and in that short period of time, we've made an enormous amount of progress. We could cite a lot of statistics, but my favorite is the decline and collapse of coal as a long-term viable source of electricity generation. In the United States alone, in 2010, coal made up about half, a little more than half of America's electricity generation, and here we are 10 years later, and it's less than 20%. So the evidence that we should, I guess the source of hope that we should take from what's happened so far since we've become apprised and seized with climate as a major crisis of our own making is that, unlike what you read in the doomsday scenarios popular in the press, we've actually solved a lot of big problems, and we've invested in the technological innovations that will solve the remaining ones.
Lucas, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to solutions. There is still a lot to do, taking Jerry's point, but there's still more to do. And so this goal of net zero carbon emissions has become kind of a rallying cry for that. We're seeing prominent multinational corporations and a growing number of countries committing to such target. Can you briefly describe the term net zero? What does that mean for anyone who may not know? And then tell us about what some companies like yours, Microsoft, are doing to meet it.
Well, net zero is super, super easy to describe. It simply means that we are removing more carbon from the atmosphere, removing as much carbon from the atmosphere as we're putting in. So that's extremely simple to say. It's just a balancing of our carbon books. It's really difficult to actually do, though. And the reason for that is there's basically two levers that you have at your disposal. You can reduce carbon emissions, and that's one way to balance out your books. You could reduce carbon emissions to zero. We have not figured out any way to grow our economy without growing our carbon emissions to date. If we look back at the past 50 years, you see economic growth, you see an incredibly strong correlation with growth in carbon emissions as well. You could look at the other side and you could look at the removal side and you could say, well, we could just continue unmitigated emissions and remove the carbon that we emit. And we have figured out technology solutions for how to do that, but not at a scale that makes this work kind of at the global scale that we need or the economic scale that we need. And so when you think about net zero and the global need for our global economy to move to a net zero carbon economy by 2050, it's clear that we're going to have to do both. We're going to have to reduce carbon emissions as much as possible, and we're going to have to remove the rest, and we're going to have to invest in solutions in both areas. Now, for us as a global society to get there as a global economy, I believe that those organizations that have more right now should do more right now in order for us to get there and make it easier for everybody else. So back in January of this year, Microsoft committed to actually being carbon negative, to reducing our emissions by half or more, removing the rest, and then going beyond that to remove all of the historical emissions that Microsoft has been responsible for since we were founded in 1975, and to invest $1 billion through a new climate and innovation fund in carbon reduction and removal technologies. Because there's one thing that I would just add on top of that, those that have more should do more. It's that those that have more should do more, and they should do it in a way that enables and empowers others to follow in their footsteps with less cost and with less effort. Because that's what we need to do. We need to plow a road that makes it easy for everybody to travel down towards 2050 on a net zero carbon path.
Carbon negative and erasing your carbon footprint is a major goal, and we'll be watching to see your progress. But now let's move along and bring in our guest, our first guest. Speaking of net zero, she was in the room when the concept really took shape in the global community. Among her many illustrious titles, she served as Special Representative to the UN Secretary General. She is the former CEO of Sustainable Energy for All, and she served as a World Bank Vice President for Climate Change. She is now the first woman to serve as Dean of the Fletcher School at Tufts University. Please welcome Rachel Kyte. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, it's good to see you.
You too. So sticking with the concept of net zero emissions, many countries and companies have recently pledged to achieve this target. Net zero is fast becoming the guiding principle, but we can't ignore that significance. But the goal is not enough on its own. So how do you think these promises move from talk into real world action?
Well, we've got two processes going on hand in hand at the moment. We've got leaders in almost every sector of the economy establishing how they, as businesses, are going to be able to meet a net zero target, which means how will they produce profit, how will they employ people, how will they operate in a world which is deeply decarbonized. And so we've got company after company coming forward now saying that they can commit to a target 2050, 2045, 2040, even earlier, depending on the size of the business. And that's beginning to transform the conversation within each sector. Some of these are really hard things to do. How do you produce steel? How do you produce cement? How do you ship goods around the world? But we're seeing, even in hard to abate sectors, leadership being established. At the same time, we've got governments making their commitments. And this is the year when every government is supposed to ratchet up their commitment, their bottom-up commitment about how they are going to do this. How are they going to reduce their emissions? How will they emerge as part of a global economy which is zero net by mid-century? Now, that's been disrupted a little bit by COVID. The bandwidth, the managerial bandwidth in many countries is severely strained, especially in middle income and low income countries. But this is the year when those plans are supposed to come forward.
Let's shift to the concept of a green economic recovery. Rachel, I know you've made the case for that. Why? What is it, and why do you think it's important?
Well, the economic recession, depression in some parts of the world, brought about by the COVID pandemic, has sort of knocked everybody back. It's probably going to push more than 100 million people back into poverty. So we have to sort of dress ourselves down, stare at this problem, and work out how are we going to, as we recover from the pandemic, achieve two core goals. One, deeply decarbonize. How do we use the opportunity of having to instigate all kinds of reform measures and recovery measures to be able to make sure that we're on a different trajectory coming out of this crisis? So use the opportunity of a crisis to get back on track. But at the same time, the recovery has to work better for everybody. Embedded in the Paris Agreement is not just the idea that we reduce emissions, but that we leave no one behind. So we need to have energy and food systems which are resilient to climate change, which are low carbon, but which also work for everybody. We need food systems which are not going to produce a lot of carbon emissions, but which actually give people a chance at a healthy, affordable diet. So in this moment of crisis, we have that opportunity. And the good news is that there's actually quite violent agreement amongst economists and others around the world that there are short-term measures that can be taken, which will get more people back at work, which will instigate recovery in the economy, but which also are really good things for a net zero global economy in 10, 20 years. So for example, refurbishing the built environment, all the jobs that can be created from making our buildings more efficient and passive in terms of their carbon balance. Those are good quality local jobs can be created now, and which will put us in a much better position for the long term as well.
Jerry, I'd like to bring you in on this. What do you think about the concept of a green recovery and it actually getting implemented in some of the biggest economies in the world? I'm thinking specifically of the United States, where the concept of a green recovery is somewhat politicized. So what do you think about the real world odds of this happening?
Well, I think they're pretty good, largely because we're living through a pretty radical reordering of facts on the ground, even in the United States, where I'm looking at my window here in Ottawa, Canada, and the sky is sort of a beigey pink color because of wildfire smoke from biblical event of wildfires in California. I think that there's a really good chance of it. Governments are going to have to walk and chew gum at the same time to a large degree, and that's something that they're accustomed to doing in times of crisis. I was wondering if, Rachel, you might want to reflect on, given that we are talking about the proceedings of the UN this week, is it perhaps, if there's any silver lining in this cloud, is it perhaps a stroke of luck that COP26 has been put off a year?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think we wouldn't have ever wanted something like this to make people really think through the fundamentals, but it is clear it's given the opportunity for a Green New Deal in Europe. And of course, the proof of the pudding is in implementation. But what they've put forward seems to make good sense. That we've just had a China EU bilateral, and the news coming out, or the representation of what was discussed by the Chinese this week, would indicate that there is some agreement there about the need to really drive through and meet medium-term goals in terms of carbon emissions. I think everybody's watching to see what happens in the United States in November, of course. But I think that pause was important. But we do have a really important issue in front of us, which is how do you help those countries which still need to grow their economies, which still need to build new jobs for the future? How do we help them at a time when they are indebted? They will be expected to become more indebted in order to work their way out of the economic crisis. So for low-income and middle-income countries, where is the solidarity, and how are we going to be fit to help them get onto a lower carbon course, and do that in the teeth of what is proving to be a more global and deeper economic impact of COVID than we've experienced in modern economic history?
Rachel, to round this out, multilateralism is against the ropes. And so I'm wondering if you see opportunities to bring nations back together in global cooperation. I know you mentioned some countries coming together there, but these are somewhat tense times with a lot going on around the world. So what do you think the prospects are for really building a robust global community once more?
I would like to think that we can do two things at the same time. One is that we put scaffolding around the processes that we use for international cooperation right now. So scaffolding around the World Health Organization, around the G20, frankly, and the G7, where international cooperation on an economic front has normally taken place, but that we can actually have a little bit of a moment to think about the blue sky and what do we need international cooperation to look like going forward. So can we solve for the crisis of climate and the crisis of indebtedness and lack of inclusivity in economies at the same time? Can we get all of the major actors around the table? When we created the Bretton Woods institutions more than 75 years ago, when we created the UN 75 years ago, it's its birthday this week, then the world was a very different place, and who needed to be at the table was different. And so is this a moment when we can get the leadership together and sit around and think about how do we build those institutions to cope with a decarbonizing economy that has to work for more people, more fair, for the future, while the institutions right now have at least the first stages of recovery. We have to be able to do both. That's the call to leadership this week in New York.
Rachel, Kyte, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So Jerry and Lucas, let's unpack a little bit of what Rachel said there. Jerry, I'd like to go to you first. What's your thought on the point there about multilateralism and international cooperation? Do you feel like that's in jeopardy in this moment, or there's an opportunity to come together in a new way?
Well, there's no doubt that it's under threat, and I would certainly associate myself with Rachel's remarks that the institutions we created to govern the post-war period have become frayed because the world that they were created to govern has faded. And I'm a little more optimistic, I think, than most about multilateralism. I was involved in the Paris Accord negotiations, and for many good substantive reasons, people like to take shots at the Paris Accord, but I usually reply saying, name one other thing that the entire world has agreed to do together other than the Paris Accord in the past 10 years. So I think that there's both the incentive structure, the burning platform, if you will, to make real progress on climate change, and the institutional will in key countries. I think that I'm an optimist about the COP26 process. I think it was really important that the process was given some breathing room so that major actors could kind of get their acts together. I think obviously a lot depends on what happens, the outcome of the United States election. But again, reflecting the theme we were talking about earlier about how quickly things are changing. If you look at Joe Biden's platform, it's almost unimaginable that a nominee for a major American political party would take that kind of aggressive approach to climate change, even one electoral cycle ago. So a lot of big things have moved really quickly, and I think a feature of the next 10 years geopolitically and in global markets will be even greater velocity of movement among those things.
Lucas, what about on the corporate side? That collaboration there is as important as on the country level, I would imagine, or at least from your perspective. So what are you doing to bring your fellow corporations together?
Yeah, I do think there is a lot of opportunity on the corporate side. I would preface all of these comments, I think, with the recognition that the private sector cannot and will not do this alone. We do need proactive government engagement on the topic of climate. I think this issue, I'll just rewind here a little bit to the green recovery bit first. And this issue of ensuring that, I think, Jerry, you'd mentioned walk and chew gum at the same time, that we understand that recoveries are a reactive thing, right? We're recovering from an event. And if we don't take a more proactive offensive strategy to our engagement with climate change, then the number of things that we are going to have to recover from is just going to accelerate out of control. I think, Jerry, you'd already mentioned, the wildfires. I have the privilege of living in the Pacific Northwest, one of the most beautiful places in the world, I believe, on average. It's definitely not been one of the most beautiful places in the world this past week or so. And, all up the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, we're suffering unprecedented economic damages, societal damages from these fires. And we're going to be talking about having to recover from this incident. And so my point is simply that there is no other way than to take an offensive strategy and to think about these, to ensure that we have proactive, offensive strategies as part of our recovery, or we'll just get into an infinite loop and ultimately run out of time. Now, what can corporates do about all of this? What corporations can do and what the private sector can do is A, take this seriously, B, commit to ensuring that their business operations, that their private sector activities are in line with this net zero carbon economy, make those commitments, whether it's net zero, carbon negative, or whatever else. And then C, to work together to ensure that it's not just about making commitments, but that companies have a path forward for how to actually achieve the commitments, because these aren't easy things for companies to achieve, particularly in the absence of regulatory reform. And so what Microsoft has been doing, amongst many other things, is working with a small set of organizations, companies that have been leading on the sustainability and climate issue for many years, through a new initiative called the Transform to Net Zero Coalition. And this is a coalition made up of leaders, like I'd mentioned, Microsoft, Danone, Unilever, Nike, companies that have really put sustainability at the core of their business for quite a long time. And the purpose of the coalition is to ensure that, of course, we've all made our commitments. There's many other companies making commitments, but that the transformation that we're making inside of our business to help transform society towards a net zero carbon economy, that those transformations are instantiated in kind of corporate playbooks that other companies can hopefully follow or learn from and improve upon, so that it's not as difficult to achieve the goals that our companies are setting today. It's not as difficult for them to achieve their goals as it was, for instance, for a Microsoft to achieve the goals it set forth 5 years ago. And that gets back to my last set of comments, which is really that, those that have more need to do more and need to do more in a way that makes it easier for everybody else to follow along on the journey.
Yeah, and if I could just follow up on what Lucas said there, Julia, because I think it's a really, really important point. As someone who has spent a good deal of my career in government, it's really important that governments who want to act proactively and aggressively on climate change get market support for doing it. Goodness knows that there are enough market actors who want to see the status quo obtained. And it's a hopeful sign that companies like Microsoft are not only taking innovative approaches to net zero or net negative in their case, but bringing other large consequential market actors along with them. This is one of the wisest people I've known in this field many, many years ago said to me that people treat this like a theology problem when it's really math class. And that means that we can't be in opposing ditches throwing rotten tomatoes at each other about how to make progress in this problem. You're going to make a lot more progress a lot more quickly if large private sector actors are acting in concert with the UN and acting in concert with major governments around the world to get this done.
Right, and certainly investor. Oh, sorry, we will have to move along just so we can get to our next guest here. But I did want to flag that investor pressure, indeed, super important as well. Corporates internally taking up, the charge, a fascinating area, and that could be a whole other session. I do want to get to this poll that we briefly put out ahead of this event. And we went to Twitter and we asked, which region do you think will play the biggest role in addressing climate change over the next 30 years? 47% said the European Union, roughly 34% said China, 11% said the United States, and around 7% picked India. So, Jerry, a quick reaction from you. Not much faith in the U.S. there, perhaps maybe more in China than some might have thought. What do you think?
Well, I think it's an interesting sample of the people who follow us all on Twitter that they're paying attention to what's happening in the European Union. And if you care about this issue, you have to recognize that I think even the biggest optimists, among the most optimistic people amongst climate analysts and watchers, would have doubted that the European Union would have moved so far so fast as they have. So I think that they have smartly coupled geopolitical and economic strategy in the European Union, and they see the advantage in being the first mover in large developing technological sectors like hydrogen. So it doesn't surprise me. I think we have a good informed viewership here at GZERO, and they're reflecting what's going on. At the end of the day, though, however, it's really important that the two largest emitters in the world, the United States and China, find some way to have a constructive conversation and participate in the multilateral process of COP26, because without them, there's not much of an agreement.
Okay, it's time to bring in another guest who has a page-long list of accolades. Mark Carney served as governor of both Canada and England. He is the UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Special Advisor to UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson for COP26. Mark, welcome.
Thank you very much, Julia. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So you are up to a lot these days, and you're really focusing on rallying the financial community globally to act on climate. First, can you explain for our audience why climate matters to financial markets?
Well, I think for financial participants, it matters for three reasons. The first is risk. I've heard the earlier conversation and the references to the wildfires. If you think about extreme weather events, wildfires would be one example. But if you look over the last 3 decades, those have gone up 3 times, the number of them, the incidents. But the cost of that to the financial sector, principally the insurance sector, has gone up 5 times. And the uninsured cost has gone up 8 times. So there's huge risk in the actual manifestation of climate change. That's the first element of risk. There's also an element of risk or opportunity in the transition of where we are today to what Lucas was talking about, of where we need to get to, the changes to the economy. And that's the second reason why the financial markets care about this issue, is they see huge opportunity here, and we shouldn't forget that. If you look at the energy transition, reasonable estimates of what's required is that the investment in energy infrastructure is going to have to double for decades. That's $3.5 trillion a year of energy infrastructure investments for years and years and years. That is an opportunity. Think about 400 million new homes, let alone the homes, the retrofits or the refurbishment of homes that Rachel was talking about. So again, opportunity there, opportunity, new materials, new applications of technology, other aspects, and on and on. The third reason, though, why financial markets and participants care about this issue is responsibility. After all, they are investing or lending our money, all the people on this GZERO podcast and event and beyond. It is ultimately people's money. People care passionately about this issue, more and more about this issue, and the financial sector exists to serve their clients. The clients care, the financial sector cares, and they're really now getting behind trying to find solutions to it.
Well, we've ended up with a few Canadians on at this event. I'm Canadian. Mark, Jerry, you're both Canadian. And Mark and Jerry, I know you know each other well through your work together. Jerry, I'm going to hand it over to you to ask Mark a few questions.
Sure. And we decided that Lucas has from northern Wisconsin.
Anytime you can come over the border. Officially, that's not true, actually, at the moment, for other reasons.
Yeah, officially, it's not true. It is a reflection of where we find ourselves globally, that Mark and I are about 6 kilometers away from each other and having this conversation pixelated. So it's a good place to start, Mark. So how do you keep people's focus on climate through this period? We'd speculated, I don't know if you heard the conversation before you got on, that it may have provided a good kind of opportunity to take a step back in the COP26 process. I think in any reasonable person's estimation, even assuming a positive climate outcome of the United States election, you weren't going to have an incoming administration turn around the American aircraft carrier ship estate in a matter of days. And plus you get, sometimes a little more time is just what the doctor ordered. So how do you feel about how COP26 is going?
Well, the first thing, just in terms of COP, the reason it was delayed, as Rachel said, partly just the mindshare logistics of it, as many things were delayed, the Olympics, other things delayed, but very much delayed to ensure that it's a high ambition COP. The UK presidency, in partnership with Italy and a huge number of countries, want this to succeed, so they want to take the time to make sure they get it right first. Secondly, I would say, and particularly what we're talking about in the private sector, Microsoft, one example, the financial sector writ large, is that there has not been, people have not taken their eye off the ball on addressing these issues. If anything, the focus on this has accelerated. You see the U.S. Business Roundtable announcement just today, and a host of things that have happened in the financial sector focused on finding this. I think the third thing that's hugely important, and kind of touch on something that Lucas said earlier, which is about what happens when you look to recover, or when you have a major event and you look to move forward. Particularly with the tragedy that we're living through right now with COVID, it is such a reset for society, but also for companies. There are relatively few companies who came into this event with a strategy that is perfectly online for the new world that's going to emerge on the other side because of the acceleration of digital, because of the importance of resilience, changes in supply chains. A number of factors have shifted. Business drivers have shifted. Now, when you're in a position, whether you're in the financial sector, in the tech sector, in industrial sector, service sector, and you're resetting your strategy in an environment where people are more and more focused about sustainability, about getting to net zero, well, and your governments and regulators and investors and banks are asking you what your net zero strategy is, you're going to have a net zero strategy, or you're implicitly saying your strategy is to wind your company down over the course of the next decade or two, while the world gets on with moving in that direction. So for all those reasons, there has been this focus during this period. It's a huge task. A lot more needs to be done, but thus far it's very encouraging from where I see it.
I want to give Lucas a chance to jump in here.
Well, I would just say, I think, following on from that comment, one of the things I've looked back at the past year, basically since January, and you realize that, the very first question I was asked was COVID and climate. How do you do both of these things at the same time? Well, since January, some of the most, monumental, significant climate commitments have been made and continue to be made. I mean, Mark, you mentioned this. During this COVID crisis, we've also, the private sector has been the sector that has been kind of moving the most rapidly, I believe, in ensuring that the answer to that question of what is your net zero strategy is, here's my net zero strategy, not I'm planning on winding down the success of my business over. By the way, I think that was the best phrasing I've ever heard about what the silence on a net zero strategy ultimately means. Because I completely agree. I think that we talk about Satya, I think, does a fantastic job about talking about for Microsoft to do well, we need the world to do well. That's why, this enlightened self-interest that companies have to say, if we do want to do well, we don't want to wind down our success over time. We want to wind it up. And to do that, we need the world to keep doing well. And the best available science, the best available financial economic forecast, there's nothing that says the world's going to do well if we don't get it out ahead of this.
Yeah, and if I could ask you a question on that point, Mark, one of the most hopeful signs has been the acceleration in ESG investing through the crisis. And for a very long time, ESG was considered a late cycle luxury in the investment community. That's one signpost, but what kind of signpost can viewers look for to say, international financial markets are finally starting to get it and they are moving in a positive direction for the climate? I know that's a lot of the work you're doing now for COP26, but maybe you could preview the kind of how do individual viewers or people concerned about the climate that we're moving in the right direction?
Well, I'm going to throw around a bunch of numbers that are, and they're all big. They're going to sound big, and they really are big, because we're going to get the numbers finance that are bigger than global GDP. So if we were having this conversation in 2018, I would have said, look, there is $30 trillion in investment money that's dedicated to addressing this issue. That's now well over $100 trillion. That's how much it's grown in the last couple of years. There's $150 trillion, and this is money from all the major banks, all the major pension funds, all the major asset managers and beyond that want this type of climate disclosure. In other words, what is a company doing? What's their current carbon footprint? And what do they intend to do about it? How do they manage it? Is there senior management compensation related to it? And so that's a phenomenal figure. And all of those tell you that this is moving from the fringes, not the fringe, to the mainstream. And the other important factor here is that the performance of companies across sectors, it's not just about the tech sector, although this is certainly true in tech, but across sectors where companies have put weight on environmental, social, and governance issues, demonstrable weight on that, they have consistently outperformed other companies. So this coming together of doing well by doing good, there is more and more evidence for it. So you see all of that now coming together. On top of that, society really saying that they want to see real progress towards net zero. And if I can say one other thing, because it came up earlier, and when Lucas was talking about Microsoft and sort of setting a path and also helping others to get to net zero, other companies, other countries to get to net zero. What's important here is there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, as you know, Jerry and Lucas and Julia, on technologies that can be implemented. But there are some technological choke points that need to be addressed on carbon capture and storage, on hydrogen, on various other areas. But the good news is that as companies have plans, as they work towards those, it becomes more and more obvious what problems need to be solved, or to put it more accurately, what technologies need to go from uneconomic to economic. And more money will be invested in that, because a problem is a huge opportunity if the world's doing what everyone's saying they're going to do, which is to go to net zero. And that is a powerful, powerful dynamic. And last point, I said that was my last point, but now here's my last point, which is that it's an old central banker trick. But if government policy fills in behind this, then that will accelerate the process. As Lucas said, the private sector is doing a lot. It won't get there alone. But as policy comes in, and we've seen it in the EU, we'll see it in other jurisdictions, that will make a huge difference.
I have one last question, Mark, and then I'm going to toss it back to Julia. I guess at a very general level, can you give people a sense of why you remain hopeful about this, and what is your biggest concern?
Well, in terms of hope, I would say that we have, a lot on the technology side, not my expertise, but energy technology. There is a lot that is there that's cost competitive, from energy on through materials and others. And so it's a question of scale and putting it to work. So on the engineering side, if you will, it's there. Secondly, in terms of finance, absolutely this has become mainstream. And, to be candid, the financial sector sees a huge commercial opportunity because this is what people want. Now climate will be one of the core determinants of value in the financial sector, just like credit risk is, or interest rates, or where currencies are going. And that changes the game entirely. And then the third issue, and this is the one that's not absolutely settled, but is the political consensus coming together. And what I really mean is the social consensus, which is coming, is I think arguably here in most jurisdictions, but that being translated into policy. And that is, that's the challenge. That's part of what a successful COP can make happen, because you're doing things together. And that was the dynamic that was created for Paris, which was a success, without question, in my view. And that is absolutely the intention of the UK in partnership with Italy for Glasgow. And we've got a lot of allies in that.
Great.
Excellent. Ending on a hopeful note there. I guess the one last thing I wanted to bring up is the point about voluntary carbon markets. Mark, I know you're working on this. Can you just give us end us off with that summary of that work?
Yeah, very, very briefly. So earlier we were talking about net zero, and so this is part of the net in net zero. Some of it will be technologies, carbon capture, storage, and use, but for a period of time, there is a role to be played with so-called nature-based solutions. So think planting new forests, not existing forests, but new forests, which act as natural carbon sinks. There's other natural carbon sinks, as well as offsets from converting existing dirty power, for example, into clean renewable power. But the markets that exist to pay for those are very immature. I gave you a bunch of numbers in the trillions. I would spell trillion with an M for these markets today. In other words, it's only 300 million of trades last year, which is nothing in financial market terms. It should be in the tens of billions to the hundreds of billions. Last point. So in order for that to happen, there's a huge working group of the private sector has just been struck under the leadership of Bill Winters, who's the CEO of a bank called Standard Chartered. One of the former commissioners of the SEC, Annette Nazareth, is co-leading this, and they're working on a blueprint for this market for the world, and looking to unleash that at the start of next year, early of next year, so that we can get going on this market, so the private sector can get going on this market by the time of COP in November 2021.
Great. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Lucas, I'd like to go to you to talk about data. We heard about the role of the financial sector there, but we also hear the line, you can't manage what you can't measure. And so data plays a huge role here. I know Microsoft is working on this specifically with some new exciting products. So can you talk about that for us, the connection between data and environmentalism?
Yeah, I mean, that old adage is pretty true. It's hard. I don't know if you can't, but it's very difficult to manage what you can't measure. I would actually kind of build off of just a specific example, what Mark was just talking about nature-based carbon markets. Great. Evolution has provided us with a fantastic, technology called photosynthesis to remove carbon from the atmosphere. We could amplify that. We could accelerate that. We could plant more trees, etc. Well, how many trees are there on Earth? How many trees are there here in the United States? We live in an information age, or so-called information age, but it's one of the most narcissistic terms that we've actually used, because so much of the data that we collect and monitor in this so-called information age is about ourselves. We need to start extending that data estate to the full scope and scale of the natural world, so that we can harness nature's technologies to help us solve some of our climate challenges. You can do that by collecting large amounts of data through satellite remote sensing, for instance, and then training kind of best-in-class artificial intelligence algorithms to convert that raw data that those satellites are collecting into actionable information, into information about, for instance, where all of our trees are, what species they are, what types of carbon sequestration potential they have. In fact, we worked with a small nonprofit called Sylvia Terra to do exactly that here in the United States, counting and placing in space kind of almost 100 billion trees here in the United States, for the first time, building up that data accounting of our nature-based solutions. And then once you have that information, that data estate is what those markets that Mark was talking about are going to need to stand on as their kind of foundational infrastructure. So look, we know that the natural resources that the world has, we need to manage better. We can do that through optimization. We can do that through more advanced machine learning technologies, but we need to collect the data. We need to aggregate it. We need to provide access to it. And we need to make it as easy as possible to build new machine learning and other kind of artificial intelligence technologies on top of it. That's why 3 years ago, we invested in a program called AI for Earth. It was dedicated to kind of bringing together a community of organizations that are working on these types of technologies. We grew it from, it was a 5-year, $50 million investment. 3 years in, we've grown it from nothing to over 500 organizations in more than 90 countries around the world. And this past Earth Day, we updated our commitment to build out what we're calling a planetary computing platform, a platform that offers a lot of the technologies and approaches that I just mentioned. And just the point I would just highlight here is it's not technology for technology's sake. It's simply a recognition that all of the solution areas that we've been hearing on this call, and most recently, carbon markets, they are going to need to stand on, just like every other solution increasingly does in the world we live in. They're going to need to stand on a foundation of data and computing infrastructure. And we still have a long way to go for our climate solutions to stand on that. But that's one of the things that we at Microsoft are starting to build out, and many others in the corporate or in the private sector are working on as well.
Great, thank you for that summary. So to round us out here, Jerry, I'm going to go back to you and put a bigger question to you. Like the pandemic, climate change affects everyone around the world. And climate change, we see images of polar bears and penguins, but it's really not just about them. It's about human toll here. So as we step away from this event, what do you think we should all keep in mind as it relates to climate change and really our fellow humans?
Well, I'd say two things. One is that it's understandable that people are impatient. This is a very, very big problem we're dealing with. We're talking about pretty fundamental reorientation of our species' interaction with the natural world. And I would second what Lucas said about needing to orient outward all of the marvelous technological innovation that we've seen over the past 20, 30 years. But I'd also say that the environmental movement is very new. The Rio Summit happened the year I was born, and while I'm not getting any younger, I'm not that old. And I think like most people who've lived through enormous periods of change, it feels really messy as you're going through it. But most of the changes that we've undertaken ourselves as a species are positive ones. I think that progress is happening. More of it needs to happen more quickly, but it is happening. And I think when historians write back about this time period, it will look a lot more orderly than it feels to live through it.
Well, we'll leave it there. That does it for us today. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us. Please note that there are 3 more live streams coming up from GZERO Media over the next few weeks. You can see the schedule on your screen. And be sure to head to gzeromedia.com/UNGA, UNGA, to learn more about climate and other issues that Microsoft and Eurasia Group are tackling throughout the UN General Assembly. Lucas and Jerry, thank you so much. You were excellent wingmen. I really appreciate it. And I've really enjoyed joining you all. Thank you again for watching. I'm Julia Pyper. Take care.